Welcome to Real Flix Reviews. We're like a book club for people who hate reading. To continue on of our black and white theme this month, I picked the movie made in 1939 called Young Mr. Lincoln, starring Henry Fonda. This week we have Jonathan Charney, James Stevens, and Ryan Preston. Thanks for watching the show. I want to tell you before we start that we have a Facebook page if you want to take a look and visit it at facebook.com/realflixreviews and drop us a line and tell us which movie you would like us to do.
Please, we're running out of ideas.
Not really.
So, who has the synopsis of this movie?
I got it right here. It's Young Mr. Lincoln, 1939, a fictionalized account of the early life of the American president as a young lawyer facing his greatest court case.
That's the whole movie, pretty much.
That's it. You know, when you're describing black and white movies, you almost want to tell them what it's entirely about just to get them to watch it.
I love the fictionalized account. I mean, it's a movie.
Because it's not exactly historically accurate.
Right. Wait, it's not?
Name a movie that's historically accurate.
Star Wars.
Yeah, that's right. So I was going to say the one thing I always thought about this movie, that it's the pacing of this movie is almost continuous. The whole thing up until the very end is when it really starts to change.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's when you really find out what the movie's kind of about. I mean, you know, I obviously I don't just start filtering through movies from the 1930s. Although I'm kind of surprised I missed this because I kind of like Henry Fonda, and apparently this is what he's known for.
He's a Golden Pond fan.
Yeah, he's done a lot of I guess you would call it like pro-America movies. He's done a lot of them over his career.
Yeah, definitely. But this one, sort of sight unseen, not really knowing what it was going to be about. It definitely kept my interest. Like, I was surprised. You know, like, I mean, in this day and age of everything has to start with a fucking car chase or something blowing up, you know, to see a movie just kind of start and just sort of like, yeah, here's the characters, here's the setting, you know, and here's what's going on. And
I think it helped. I think it helped that it was a kind of a lighthearted movie, but the writing was actually amazing.
It was really good. That was what was kind of surprising me, is aside from a couple of parts that seemed to be, you know, your standard movie, let's move the plot along, some of the quirkiness of, you know, dialogue about this movie was really good.
So what parts did you think were just to kind of move the plot?
Oh shit! No, I just said that.
The
now
death.
I'm gonna cite my sources. I don't know. I just remember thinking a couple of times, like, oh, okay, you know, that's just, you know, like movie dialogue.
That's like that's the briefcase and Pulp Fiction type of scene.
Kind of like I like the scene where he's originally talking to those two people having the dispute over who owes who, how much money.
That's exactly what I was going to mention.
They're kind of like, well, what if we don't do it? And he's just like, you know, he's a happy character. It's a happy movie, but at the same time, you get this feeling like, oh no, he'll kill us if we don't do this.
You know,
right. Yeah, that was a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to tell you about the time I smashed two guys' faces together and they both broke.
Yeah. No, I like also the other scene. I think kind of like the fair things that were going on with that.
One of my favorite
with
scenes
the pie eating.
My favorite scene was actually at the end of that when they were doing the tug of war and he tied the rope to the
yeah,
the
Honest Abe sure does cheat it. You know,
Right?
Yeah,
rope
he wasn't
too honest.
Yeah.
And by the way, Honest Abe was a preachy son of a gun.
It was a really preachy movie, I thought, too.
But I actually I liked that part of it because you got some of the great lines. Like one line was, "I know that, John. What I'm afraid of is that some of the jurors might not know you," and that put me at a great disadvantage.
That's a good line. That was
you
good.
know what? I loved the entire court scene was really, really well written. I loved he was making the judge laugh. The characters seemed to be really, really kind of set in that time really well. You know,
Yeah.
I love the depiction of the 1860s, 1870s court system. It was interesting.
And the other good line is I didn't write down. I wrote the end part. Dennis was talking to Jack Cash, and it said, "Well, Cass." He said, "Well, then, if it's all the same to you, I'll call you Jackass." And the whole, you know,
Yeah.
some very amazing, very
I
quotable
just
movie.
got it. That's awesome. Yeah.
That, and he kept singing like
You
whistling
just got
Dixie.
that.
Yeah.
He kept whistling Dixie, and Dixie hadn't even been
That mouth
created
harp.
yet.
Yeah, I did write that down of the Jew harp. What do they call it? A Jew harp?
A Jew harp, yeah, the harmonica.
Because it came down from David.
I didn't catch that part.
You didn't catch that?
No.
Yeah, he goes, why is it a Jew harp? And he goes, oh yeah, because he goes, it came down from David or whatever. And then he was like,
David's harp or something like that. From the Bible.
so that makes it a Jew harp.
Yeah, exactly.
The one star of David's harp, Jew harp.
Yeah.
You can make the leap. It's
I really enjoy films from this era because not only it feels like when you're watching them, you're watching, even though it's a story and stuff like that, it's so far back that you kind of gotta. They don't have as much as they do now to accentuate the story. So it's kind of simple, but you also see the simple style of life back then, and it kind of gives you a feel of. I don't know. I really like the 30s and 40s movies there. I think they did some incredible things far beyond their time that they didn't even realize they were doing at the time.
The thing that I really appreciated about it was the sets. I liked the way they designed a lot of the sets, and
the costume design too.
These were all in studios.
Yep.
I don't think people nowadays realize that they didn't really go site to site that much.
No, it wasn't. Location shooting. That's expensive.
Yeah,
the backline.
And I think a lot of the people were studio players. I think they were contract actors versus what they do now is just find the best people for the job.
Yeah, yeah.
Matter of fact, they filmed this up near you guys in Sacramento.
Really?
Oh, did they?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. Sacramento, California.
Oh, is it Old Town Sac? Is where they did this?
That was where they did the river scenes, and then stage 3 at 20th Century Fox Studios down here in Century City.
That's kind of cool.
Isn't that crazy?
Couple of one location shot, but in Northern California.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, they didn't have to travel
too far. That's as far as they were willing to drive in the 30s.
Well, it was weird because when I was watching it,
it takes 2 weeks to get there in 1930. I mean, come on.
Well, when I was watching it, it felt like
over 40.
It felt like I was watching something out of Louisiana with the trees and stuff. As they when he was whistling with that I don't know who that guy was next to him.
His little traveling buddy.
Yeah, his traveling buddy.
Yeah, he's the one character they never introduced.
Right? The guy's got jokes, Yeah. They're traveling, and it looks like with this canopy of trees, it looks like something you'd kind of expect out of Alabama or Georgia.
They probably came out to 49.
Right.
Highway 49. Something like that when the trees were still overgrown.
Huh.
You know what I found interesting about this movie? And it started to occur to me once he had the whole almanac scene when he's like, do you have any papers? She's like, we got an almanac, and I was like, okay, that's when it started to set it up. But how much of this story could have been told today? As far as the court procedural, I mean, this is a Law and Order episode that would have been played last week.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as how the story was told, the way it kind of tipped certain things, the way it was wrapped up.
Well, the Almanac case I read, I think it was on IMDb, I think I read it. It was, that case didn't even happen during that time period.
Yeah.
It was later in history or something, but they decided
It seemed really...
prevalent?
Yeah, prevalent and thought out, and something that okay, it's easy to wrap your mind around and get the whole scope of the thing. It was really well written. Somebody did their homework on it.
I think one of the part of this was based on a semi-true event, where he was a railroad lawyer and something happened. So I guess a little bit is based on true events.
Yeah, that's like every movie that says based on a true story. It's so loosely based on a true story.
We always change the names and the location and
source code based on a true story.
So here's my question: if they just came out, if they just made the modern remake, did it exactly the same, do you think this movie would be a success or a failure?
I think it'd be a failure.
Because I was thinking about this, because I don't think people could stand, because this movie's pacing is very almost the whole movie.
Pacing aside, but you could use the same story.
Yeah, but you'd have to tell it.
You would have to do it with the same dialogue, because the way they talked back then,
I was going to say
it was a simple and welcoming kind of a movie. It was kind of one of those.
But if they did this story or this movie and they produced this movie, be made for Hallmark Channel or something, to be honest,
right? Because they already did a Lincoln one.
It's going to depend on the budget. I'll bring up True Grit when John Wayne True Grit. When was that? 1960, something like that.
Something like that. We did
whatever. Okay, anyway, it was a long time ago, and then they remade it in 2010, 2011. The court scene in that movie was exactly the same, damn near word for word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As long as they did it as a period piece, it's still held up as
69.
far as the points of the case that they were making.
I think it would turn into like they already basically did it. They turned it into a film called Lincoln, and they went the more dramatic route.
Well, Lincoln is, I think, isn't Lincoln about the Civil War versus Lincoln's younger career? Because this is the first movie I remember that ever talked about before he became Senator Lincoln or
I believe there was
President
some
Lincoln.
movies done before about that.
I
don't know.
Within the modern era, say within the last
in the modern
30
era,
years.
yeah.
Back then, you kind of had the feel of simple goodness, I guess you would say, and now it's a totally different feel in the world. So I think if we went back and tried to redo it, it couldn't be like, you know how it was kind of quirky with him in the 30s, and the way they presented stuff back then was a more
it was a simpler story.
a simpler, easier way to explain it to you, to make you feel like, oh, okay, as opposed to now where it would be like, he's got to win the war, he's got to say this speech that's going to empower all these people.
I was going to say, one of the reasons I really love this movie is it's simple storytelling at its best. You know, it's
hell yeah.
It's starting out plot. This is what happened. I mean, it's very simplistic, but the way you watch it, it's like a breath of fresh air because nothing's in your face. It's
it's also a great example of character building for what people really understood of Abraham Lincoln at the time. I mean,
and
you watch the
twists.
1930s depiction of the 1860s, and I felt that they really tried to build this character like really well to what we know,
and a storyline with a twist as well, if you notice, because in the end where they were like, oh, you did it to the guy that they had up earlier. I thought that was pretty cool that they pulled that in, because it is a movie from like 1939, so you wouldn't expect there to be like a twist or something to surprise you.
Like, it almost seems like something you would be able to see today, as far as like how they tried to kind of unfold the story.
Right? Yeah. No, and I agree with you 100% on that. I just think if they redid it today, it would be campy, or it would be turned into something else.
That's why I said it seems like a Law and Order episode.
Right.
So what were you going to say, James?
Well, I was just excuse me. Pulling up just to see how many movies were released in 1939, because it's
a lot.
If we think about
really
how many movies were released last year, think about that versus how many movies were released in, let's say, 1939. There was only I think I just saw something that just said like not that many.
Are you talking just general theater releases or like box office majors, or? Because I would
either.
If you go like theater releases, it's got to be an order of magnitude greater now than it was back then.
Right.
I think somebody just said 500. I don't think that's right. 500 seems like a lot.
I've seen a lot of movies from the 30s and 40s.
They turned out a lot of movies in the 30s and 40s,
right?
Because it's sort of the golden age of Hollywood. I mean, that's when the monster movies were coming out. Universal Studios were putting out
Gone with the Wind
Not
came
to mention,
out.
you've just basically stepped out of the silent era, where they're starting to use camera angles, tricks, lighting,
people are saying
color.
stuff like, you want to go to the talkies.
No color, I mean.
So did anybody?
So it's probably somewhere around 500. But think about how many movies released last year, and then
shoot, I mean, between independently released, studio released, I mean, digitally released,
couple of thousands.
Yeah. So I mean,
if you ask me, it was back when film was actual art.
Exactly. That's what I was going to get to. Is that they had to produce a movie that people were going to take their time out of their day to go and see. And then they also have to think that not very many rural areas even have movie theaters. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be marketed more towards city areas and more populated.
See, that's why a lot of these movies were popular, and that's why a lot of the westerns started to come out in the time, is because it was a depiction of something that most people in the big cities weren't really used to, so they could take a lot of liberties with the storytelling and stuff like that. Yeah. But this it seemed to be a lot more of a budget to this one than your usual Western movie.
You had made a mention about the spanning of the film, how it's a little bit slower. Back then, it was all brand new. So it wasn't slow for back then, especially because you got to realize they stepped out of, like, for example, All Quiet on the Western Front. They came out with a silent version of this film that was 3 hours long, and they had it in theaters. So you got to imagine people are. It's more of this is the new thing. It's like it's like a fucking iPod, or
the only reason why I said it was a slower pace,
iPod.
I don't know,
iPad,
because just as far as comparing it to a modern movie, because not everybody who's going to see this movie is going to look back and go, okay, in this time, this movie was slow, so I should give it a little more patience. People are going to judge it by today's standards. And so the reason why I said it's slower, because if you look at today's movies, there's not a lot of slow burn movies that generally people are willing to watch.
That's why I said everything nowadays starts with a freaking car chase.
That's where I was going to bring it back to, is the fact that, I mean, the movies coming out now, you're competing with other movies that are basically the same.
Yeah.
So you have to be bigger, badder, more interesting.
Everything nowadays.
But you know what?
Yeah.
Back then, that was the first time that had been done, at least on film.
Exactly.
So this was all new and exciting, as opposed to now we go back and look at it. Us as people today, just our patience is shot.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
You know, because everything is now.
Yeah.
Well, back then, 1939, I mean, we didn't have the... Like, I mean, you think about it, like back in the carriage days, it would take you a month and a half to go visit a friend. Now it's like, it's going to take me 30 minutes in the car.
Yeah.
If we can... it kind of shows the, I guess you could say, the advancement from... them to now.
To me, what it does is it really makes me appreciate the different aspects of filmmaking. Whereas I'm not looking at the pretty pictures, I start to pay attention to different things. Like I love the orchestral music that's going on through the whole thing. Some of the quirky dialogue. Like I said, I start noticing the writing is really, really fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons why I really liked The Killing, is because instead of like modern movies, all you're seeing is CG, lying here, person comes up to here, says this, I'm really picking apart the movie. When you do this, you can actually sit back and just go, hey, this is good. This is a movie that you can sit down with everybody and everybody would actually get something out of it.
It doesn't have to have a catchphrase.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was going to point out is Henry Fonda's facial expressions were really great in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He did a fantastic job in this movie.
He did some really good facial expressions of showing, the emotions that he was supposedly feeling it as
I
the
love
character.
his slow, his kind of slow-paced delivery, the country boy with brains, and the way he delivered that, and everybody's reaction to his lines, like in the courthouse scene when they wanted to lynch the guy, when he was saying, "I can beat anybody here," and the buck-toothed guy's like, "Oh, I've got a toothache. I don't want to,"
Yeah.
The only problem I had with this film
is an ugly thing. Because once you get one started, there's little chance of stopping it short of bloodshed.
The only problem I had with this film was that it seemed like, to me, like it was it was a good film. It was well acted. I did enjoy it. But at the same time, it felt like I was watching a propaganda piece. Because it was so goody-goody, and it's so for the advancement of Lincoln and everything he stood for. Right? It's like this guy is like the Jesus. He can do no wrong kind of thing.
They were trying to get him on the
pen.
pen.
The 1939's depiction of what we knew about Lincoln, and at the time it was like, oh, this is the greatest person that ever lived.
Right? Which is funny. Does that say that the people back then were ignorant, or that...
Not necessarily. I think they were just a little. I mean, nowadays we know about all the little things that happen and the nuances of politics. Back then, it's so broad stroke that when somebody was good, they were good in all ways. Honest Abe.
Here's the thing. I don't think people cared about his failures. All they really wanted to know is about his victory. For one, in storytelling, if you're talking about a president, especially in an American president, you want to tell. Yay, he did this, he did that, instead of he killed this person, had sex with... nobody cared back then. I don't really
talk about
think
Clinton
about
like that.
He read a book, and all of a sudden he knew law. That's what I liked. It was like he read one book, and he was like, oh, yes, I studied law.
Here's the thing. But what you're missing on that is he also went a point and was part of the... If you actually notice, he actually went away and became part of the Illinois Congress.
Yeah.
So what they didn't show you is they didn't show you the time span. Just like, that woman before who was talking to, the Anne Rutledge...
Right.
Was actually a love interest of him, was allegedly somebody he really cared for, who ended up dying of typhoid.
Yeah.
So at the same time that he was telling the lawyer he was against, that, oh, you're just doing this to become president or to further your advancement up in the up the ladder, he was doing the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which
So
makes
that's
him
why
either
he
a
recognized
hypocrite
it.
or a complete asshole.
That's why he recognized it. He's like, I'm the young buck. You ain't
Right.
got nothing.
So
I'm the
Ryan, what
rising
did you
star.
give this movie?
Man, dude, definitely a solid 3. I really enjoyed watching it. Like, as far as Like I wasn't watching it like oh, let's take myself back to 1939. What would I think then? I watched it just, how am I going to like this movie? And it kept my attention really well. Even with the slow parts, and then once obviously it kicked off with the court case, I was in.
So what about you, Jeff?
I actually agree with Ryan. A very strong 3. Pretty much everything Ryan said kind of fell through.
James?
Yeah. I can't argue with that. I mean, I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did.
Right.
And, yeah.
Definitely.
So,
See, I'll be honest. I've loved this
10.
movie since the first time I saw this movie like 20 years ago, and I was afraid that you guys would kind of pan it. So I'll be honest, I'm kind of surprised.
It reminded me almost of like a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, if
Yeah,
you've seen
kinda,
that one,
yeah.
where it's really upbeat, happy, and
I'd say
patriotic
with the
you
same
know?
snarkiness factor.
right.
I was thinking Miracle on
It's a
34th.
perfect example of this is all you need to make a good movie.
No, I agree with you, Ryan.
Good acting, good writing, and
Right.
good story.
And it was
Yeah.
1939. I mean,
Yeah.
this was the beginning.
Well,
it wasn't the beginning. But
here's the thing for people
The
who, if you want to get
right?
a time frame, that's like 20 or 10 to 20 years after World War II. This is World War I. This is pre-World War II, or about that area. So,
about
this
5
is-
years before.
Yeah. So if you think about it,
Right?
this is.
No, like
No.
2.
No, we
Yeah.
knew who Chancellor Hitler was. He was
47,
about to
right?
start
Yeah.
making his moves.
But
in
this,
1939.
if you actually
were-
see it, I mean, we're in the middle of kind of technological advances. So I mean, just the fact, the way they did this, how they did this, and the storytelling to me is amazing.
And I love seeing props. Them use the props from like the 30s and 40s films are the greatest like special effects ever.
Because you actually, they're actually used. That's
Well,
the only
they're like
thing. so-
MacGyvers. They're like, okay, we got duct tape, we got this, we got
Right.
that. Okay, we got to make this look like a bomb and that look like a chicken.
It's
You know?
it's gaffer's tape.
Right.
yeah, mistake.
So to kick off the movie news section of the show, did any of you guys like the Bourne? Was it the Bourne Legacy? With Jeremy Renner?
Yeah, I actually
I
enjoyed that
thought it
one.
was pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
So
The whole legacy thing got kind of drawn out to me, but it was entertaining.
It wasn't
Yeah,
that bad.
So there's going to be a sequel. It looks like a
course
guy by
there
the
is.
name of Anthony Peckham. He's going to be the writer. So he's previously done Clint Eastwood's Invictus, Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes,
Ew.
and he's been hired to pen the screenplay for the film. And
You
this
know,
is a
I kind of
different.
agree with Jeff on that.
This
Ugh.
is a different writer from the previous film, apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah, I was. I mean,
Way you get
Invictus
from
wasn't
Bourne Identity.
Wait, one at a time.
horror.
So
That sucks that I respond to that. To me, the further you
No
get
pun
away from the
intended.
original Bourne Identity, the first two were novels.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they were fantastic novels.
Yeah.
all,
they were.
both
First
by
one
Robert
was,
Ludlum.
Okay, fair enough. You want to wrap it up? That's okay. I'll watch it. The next one, it's like, okay, now you're just reaching, and this one is just going to be your average Fast and Furious sequel, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
right.
I'm kind of in the same boat as that, and I mean, Invictus wasn't bad, but I didn't think it was that great.
And-
Same with
I mean,
Sherlock
what-
Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes. Do you want that guy writing this kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
So you think it's definitely going to suffer from sequel syndrome?
No, wait a minute. Is this the guy that wrote the British series Sherlock?
No,
Okay,
Guy
Okay, I
Ritchie.
was gonna say now that could be
Guy
really
Ritchie
good.
movie.
No,
No,
this is the
the
Robert
movies.
Downey Jr.
Yeah.
Oh no, this would be crap.
Yeah, see, I think this might suffer from sequel syndrome. I'm hoping not, because the reason why I liked the Bourne Legacy films with Matt Damon is because everything, though, all three movies had all the story arcs were the same, different. You actually got to see a building of the character. By the third one, you wanted a fourth.
Well, it's like the James Bond of our era, or the not our
See,
era, but the
I
later
actually
generation.
don't know if that's a fair comparison, because this one actually you had three movies that were tightly integrated,
Right,
versus
very,
each
very
James
tightly.
Bond movie is its own standalone
It's
thing.
like
Right.
that, and you just have sort of stories that seem to happen.
Yeah, and the only thing that's similar is that the character's name and maybe an actor.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
that-
why
Yeah, I don't know.
Definitely not interested.
I mean, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna see it. I'm just not
look.
lowered expectations here.
That's what's wrong with me. Of course, I'm going to see it.
Yeah, exactly. I can't say I.
It'll be one of those ones I wait to get for $1 from Redbox.
Yeah,
though.
there you go.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
And the next one is a legendary sci-fi movie is getting a remake, Logan's Run.
Really?
Oh, and dude, you know who's going to be doing this?
The story's going to be a guy by the name of Ken Levine. If you don't know who he is, he did
Ken Levine is the guy who did BioShock and BioShock Infinite.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's the guy who's going to be right at. The interesting thing is, I found on a website, this is his quote, he said, "For me, the first challenge is why people make that bargain. That's what they never fully answered in the book or the movie to my satisfaction. I really want to answer their question. I want to look back at the society in the same way people look at the Rapture and Columbia and say, okay, I get it. I may not want to live there, but why do people want to live there?"
Right.
So
exactly.
It looks like it's not going to be the typical Logan's Run in the original, something happened, they ran, escapes. It looked like this may be more
of a psychological commentary on society.
Run,
yeah.
He's totally cool with killing people, and then it's him. It's like, this is bad. So he wants people to sort of be able to make that
You are bad.
choice with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this because if anybody's ever played BioShock, because it's an amazing video game, the storytelling is insane, and I can't wait to see his take on this universe.
And it's another example of you give these things to people who are fans of them and have talent, and you're going to get a good product.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, because I think if you actually take a look at movies, totally agree, like Lord of the Rings, you may hate them, you may like them or not, but if you look at it, Peter Jackson's a fan because I don't think there's anybody else who could have made this movie and actually tell he cares about the source material.
But this guy, he's coming straight from video games. You know what I mean? Like he's coming from nowhere near movies. So I'm really interested to see.
But I don't know. I kind of
storytelling instinct.
But I disagree with you on that because as far as like the storytelling that's been done in the video games nowadays, it practically is like telling a movie.
I would actually interject and say the storytelling in video games are better than I'd say 90% of movies made today.
Well,
right?
Look at all the video games.
That's a high number, but
movies.
yeah, I understand what you're saying.
For example, if you take a look like Transformers, Sherlock Holmes, Rest in Peace Division, those movies, if you take a look about them, they're not great movies.
No,
they're not cinematic masterpieces. When if you get a movie like BioShock, Mass Effect, you get these movies that have great writing.
Yeah, and I mean, people online take all the cutscenes and piece them together and make basically little movies that are all the cutscenes put together that are in the video game. So they took out the shooting gameplay.
Well, there's a reason why
you're still dealing with the actors who were doing the voice acting.
Yeah.
So you still got that, and then you're dealing with the art direction for the thing. He can definitely put this all together, all of his knowledge together.
there's a reason why they're coming out with video games as movies now. I mean, because there is really good storytelling and there is some awesome material to go over. I think that part of the problem with converting a video game to a film is probably going to be the special effects, whatever creature or whatever you're...
I don't know. I think the early Final Fantasies, when they came out in like the early 2000s, were really well done. Movies that came out. Yeah.
I actually think the major problem is taking like 80 hours of story and make it a 2-hour, maybe 3-hour movie.
Right.
Yeah, that's why it's hard to do. You can't really... those BioShocks, the Mass Effects of the world, they're going to stand alone as video games because it's too rich of a story to tell as a movie.
Well, like, for example, I think the perfect one is Resident Evil. The first one is actually really well done.
It is.
Really good.
And if you take a look at the second, the third, and the fourth, the way it goes down, it just goes downhill.
Yeah,
but they've also
a challenge.
They've also, like, speaking of Resident Evil, what they've done is they've made the live action ones, and then they also came out with the anime version,
which are better.
Yeah,
which are actually very good.
They're good.
Stories.
But see, that's the thing. When these things start to suffer from their own popularity, people want to throw more money into them. When people throw more money into them, when I mean people like studios, when they throw that much money into it, they want to be able to get a broader audience. Which you want to make everybody happy, you make fucking nobody happy.
So did anybody see the new Judge Dredd with Carl Urban?
Yeah. I liked it.
I liked it too.
He was talking about
underrated movie.
Oh yeah.
He was actually talking about the same thing. How it wasn't a giant budget. So he said we had to be very deliberate in where we spent the money, who we spent it on, what we did it. He said he thought it turned out a better movie because you have to be selective in where you put what little cash flow you have.
Really confident in the story you're trying it.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you think? So, what do you think? So, do you think it's going to be good, or do you think it's going to suffer from Hollywood?
Oh no, I can't wait. I mean, I know this guy from Thief back in the day. It was an old computer game.
Yeah.
Oh dear, he did Thief.
1996, 1997, something like that. He's the guy who wrote Thief.
I actually have that on PC.
It was like one of the first games that really put you in this story thing.
It was.
Nobody's ever done anything like that before.
If to kind of get on my geekness, I think that was the very first that I remember in that era of that style of shadow gameplay.
It was,
You know, it was followed by that game with Sam Fisher, Splinter Cell, and other games of that ilk.
Tom Clancy
Hitman.
games.
But this thing, a few years
Splinter Cell's
before
still
Splinter
awesome.
Cell. You know?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I know what this
too much
guy is
sneaking
capable of
for
as
me.
far as his storytelling, and I know
That was the fun part.
that they might, if they give him enough control, this is going to be awesome. And I think that they think like, okay, you like Logan's Run, just go do what you want.
Yeah.
So awesome. So it's a movie we're all three hoping they make.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hoping
and not be like Akira, the live action
Because that
Akira.
movie doesn't hold up. I don't know if you've seen it recently.
Well, you know what? It's kind of nice to hear that they're doing an actual good film of a remake, because all the remakes that are coming out lately have been like either... I mean, they've even done remakes that have been flops before, you know. And
I don't know if I'm looking forward to them to remaking something that's so good, because there's generally a remake of a good movie turns to make a good movie a bad movie.
You're right. That's why I
That's
make
true.
Michael
So,
Bay
but
I don't like.
The concepts involved in Logan's Run, there's a reason that they've lasted in people's minds for like 30 years.
Right.
Exactly.
So as long as those concepts are still there, I think he could tweak the story enough to make it a modern day, you know, like have you invested in it today and not in the 80s.
So next week is James's pick. So what movie did you pick for next week?
But we're gonna go 2 years up and do The Big Store, starring Groucho Marx, Chico Marx, Harpo Marx, and with Tony Martin thrown into the mix.
No
Marx
Zeppo
Brothers.
or
No, it's just the original three in this one. This is The Big Store, 1941.
Is that on Netflix, by the way?
No.
Oh.
Good luck trying to find it, everybody.
Right?
Yeah, good luck trying to find it. If you don't own it, go buy it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I gave the movie Young the Mr. Lincoln with Henry Fonda a 4 out of 5.
45. Wow, that's a great film.
4 out of 5. James, Ryan, and Jeff gave it a 3 out of 5, and we'll see you next week.